Welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds. So glad you can join us today. I'm Gavin Spittle of 1053 The Fan, and we got a lot going on, even though it is the offseason, and man, was it tough not to see that victory green flying around the ice. And I'm sure this guest probably thinks that his Winnipeg Blue should have been flying around the ice. Connor Hrabchak works for Sports Talk Winnipeg, does a great job. He also writes for Illegal Curve, and he also has his own podcast. It's called Level Flight Winnipeg, and we always love to have Connor on to talk about some hockey. Lots of things happening in the NHL. How are you, my friend? Stick Tap, did you enjoy the game last night?
I really did enjoy the game last night, and thank you for having me. It's always an absolute blast coming on the show. And yeah, how could you not enjoy the game last night? I know, like you said, I'm sure Dallas Stars fans wanted to see the Stars around there. We wanted to see the Jets on the big stage. But 4-3 in overtime, both of these teams giving it their all in game one. That was very, very fun and very fitting that it ended on the stick of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in overtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, explain this to us, because we don't have this same feeling in America. Maybe it's the size of the country, maybe it's the number of teams in America, but maybe it's because Canada hasn't won a cup in a while. Why is it that Canada rallies around one of the Canadian teams, even though they can be known as rivals?
This is a very interesting question, even to me. So I'll be honest, I'm rooting for the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Finals, but the main reason isn't because Canadian. Like, what I love to see a Canadian team break the streak since 1993. No one's won. And what I love to, have my Canadian friends be able to celebrate a Stanley Cup, absolutely. But I'm more rooting for the Edmonton Oilers because I think Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are sick as hell. Like, I just love watching those
amazing.
two players play hockey. And I'm cheering for the fun factor of it, right? I want the series to go 7. I'm cheering for a good game. Last night we got that. There are people in Canada who are just saying, flavor to it because Connor McDavid is Canadian. So the Edmonton Oilers' best player is Canadian a little bit. Where as opposed to Florida, their best player, if you want to go Alexander Barkov, is Finnish. So it's a little bit different in that sense. But I will say personally, I don't really understand the Canadian thing. Would you like to see a Canadian team break the streak, bring the cup back to Canada? Sure. The past couple of cup winners, they've had Canadian captains anyways. So it's Canadian players are winning the cup just for an American team. So I don't really see it that way. Yeah. I'm cheering for the Oilers because McDavid and Draisaitl are awesome hockey players, and that's about it.
They were fun to watch. And boy, so was 40-year-old Corey Perry last night. What an amazing... I'm so glad that his pass was pointed out almost as much as McDavid's pass.
Yeah, that was a really nice play. I mean, Florida's penalty kill is very aggressive too. That's one tier, is they like to attack you on the penalty kill. At Edmonton, just kind of drawing out all of those players, getting the puck to McDavid. And then when you have McDavid and Draisaitl with a 2-on-1 at the side of the net like that, it's almost automatic that McDavid's going to get that puck to Draisaitl. But the play starts on the wall, not only with Corey Perry, who made a really nice play, but Nugent Hopkins, Bouchard, all the way down the wall, just kind of like drawing out Panthers penalty killers and getting that puck to the two of the best players in the world, and they did the rest.
The one thing I'll say is a lot of talk about Edmonton this morning. A lot of people now looking at that game one and seeing the physical nature that Edmonton brought to the table. That said, I personally feel as though it's like Edmonton-Dallas game one, in which Dallas won, but Edmonton clearly could see, hey, listen, if we eliminate the third period penalties, that's how we lost this game. If I'm Florida, if I don't ice the puck so many times and I play a little bit more aggressive in the third period, so I do think Florida has a game plan and some adjustments they can make into game two.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that Florida, their style is to get pucks in and just absolutely hammer the defenseman, right? It's like taking you into the alley. You're not making it out of this game, out of this series alive. And they got to that at times last night, but they didn't really get to it. And, Sam Bennett got the early goal, which was reviewed for goalie interference, but then stood. And then he got the later goal. Sam Bennett is like the driver of that, along with Matthew Tkachuk and Brad Marchand, who scored a goal last night. So Florida definitely got to their game in parts, but I'm not, not all hope is lost if you're a Florida Panthers fan looking at how they played that game last night. I do think a healthy Leon Draisaitl changes so much for this Edmonton Oilers team. Like, he had no goals and 3 assists in last year's Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
It was revealed after the fact that he was playing through hand and rib injuries. He's 100% healthy this time around, and he scored the first goal and the overtime winner last night. So that's something I'd be worried about if I was a Florida Panthers fan. But I still think that there's another gear they can get to, and they didn't hit that last night. And hey, it was 3-3 in overtime. Those kind of games can go either way. And as we saw in this series last year, because it is a rematch, even if a team is down 3-0, the series isn't over. Both of these teams are so good, so experienced. They've been here as early as last year, and they're back again. It's not going to be over. This series isn't going to be over until a team wins 4 games. So Florida definitely still has some hope and can get to their game at a higher level.
Lots of buzz here in Dallas. I appeared on Winnipeg Sports Talk to talk about that buzz, and the buzz continued during the exit interviews. From an outsider perspective, what did you think of the whole aspect of what Pete DeBoer said, and then the follow-ups of the exit interview, and now reports coming out that the room wasn't necessarily happy with 2 things: the way DeBoer handled the situation and also some of the moves that were made in the postseason?
Yeah, so first, I mean, the poll itself, from an outside perspective, was puzzling.
Yeah.
You call a timeout, you don't tell your goalie that he's being pulled, and then you let him get halfway back to his net and then yell his name and yank him off the ice. Like, that alone makes no sense to me, let alone the fact that it was a wide open Corey Perry in the slot and then a Matthias Janmark breakaway. Right. Okay, like, yeah, is that on Jake Ottinger? Sure, you want to pin that on him, that's fine. But your team wasn't ready to go in a elimination game on home ice. And we actually saw a very similar situation here in Winnipeg in Game 7 against the St. Louis Blues. Connor Hrabchak had been struggling in that series mightily and let up 2 goals early, and 2 bad goals. Like, these weren't Jake Ottinger, wide open in the slot and breakaway. There was a shot from like the top of the circles, kind of unscreened, that he let in blocker side, and everyone was sitting there thinking, oh boy, do you go to Eric Comrie right here? Scott O'Neill stuck with Connor Hrabchak in an elimination game on home ice. I feel like you got to stick with your workhorse starter. But hey, Pete DeBoer chose that. And then the throwing him under the bus per se after the game was even more puzzling, saying, well, he's lost the last 6 of 7 to Edmonton. It's a pretty big sample size. What if the Stars and Oilers play again next year? Like, you just put it out there to the world that Jake Ottinger can't beat the Oilers. Like, so that, I don't know what that does for the confidence. I mean, these 2 teams have met the last 2 years. What if they meet again in the playoffs? Well, Jake Ottinger can't beat the Oilers, and their own head coach said it. So one guy has 8 years left on his contract. One guy has 1 year left on his contract. And with every report that comes out, it looks more and more like, from an outsider's perspective at least, that Pete DeBoer won't be back next season, or at least will be back with a very short leash. Yes. And if the Stars get off to a slow start, he might be shown the door. But the whole pull into the post game was all puzzling to me, because Jake Ottinger is one of the best goalies in the league, and you don't take that guy out, especially with how the goals went in my opinion. You just don't take him out.
Well, specifically since Corey Perry had the same exact goal in the last game, and he had 2 chances at that and scored on one of them, and then the very next game he's sitting in the very same place. To me, that's coaching. They didn't make an adjustment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And that's Ottinger.
Look, not on Ottinger. And look, the guy that Pete DeBoer put in the lineup, Maverick Bourque, took the penalty.
Yes.
That put the Oilers on the power play.
Yeah.
To leave the guy wide open in the slot for the first goal. So it's like, well, you're not above the criticism here either. And look, Jake Ottinger's lost the last 6 of 7 to the Oilers. So is Pete DeBoer. He's been the coach for all of those games too. So
good point. I
don't think you can pin it on your goalie like that. I don't know.
Okay, since we're a Stars-based podcast, before we get into some NHL news, wanted to throw and allow you to play General Manager Jim Nill. You ready?
I'm ready.
Bring him back or not bring him back? Matt Duchene.
I bring him back.
Okay.
I know the Stars are up against the cap, and Matt Duchene, correct me if I'm wrong, but he wasn't his usual self in the playoffs. At least I didn't see the usual Matt Duchene.
Struggled, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, at least I didn't see the usual Matt Duchene there in the second round against Winnipeg, when I was very locked into those games for sure. But still, he's been such a rock. And Dallas's forward depth, like, he's been such a big part of that, especially down the middle. like behind a Rupe Hintz. You have Wyatt Johnson there long term. Him being your third line center potentially is very, very good center depth. So Matt Duchene has been on some value contracts these past couple of years. I'd look to bring him back.
Now, Matt Duchene did say in his exit interview, because he wants a multi-year deal, didn't necessarily say that, but he said he wanted some more stability, which we all know what that means. So does your answer remain the same if it's 2 or 3 years?
It does. I mean, Matt Duchene's what, 33, 34. I wouldn't go any longer than 3-4 years, but if you wanted a 2-year deal, 3-year deal, I'd be in on that. Again, the Stars window is pretty wide open for a long time. I know there's the Jason Robertson rumors right now going around and some very cryptic tweets going around in Stars Nation, but I mean, Thomas Harley's very young, Rupe Hintz, Mikael Granlund, like these guys are going to be here for a long time. So, you can move on from Duchene as well for a younger piece, but I'd keep him here because the Dallas Stars are good right now, and he's a good player right now.
Mikael Granlund.
So this one's interesting. He fit in very, very well, I thought. I mean, against Winnipeg, he had the one game with a hat trick, and I thought he was good the entire series.
He was.
In terms of bringing him back, though, I wonder what his cap hit would be and whether or not the Stars can maybe backfill that spot. I know he's a little bit older as well, and he fit in really, really well. So I'd look to bring him back, but that one gives me a little bit more pause than Matt Duchene.
Yeah, he's currently making just about $5 million, so you'd probably figure you'd have to equal that for another 2 or 3 years. So that one is interesting. The captain, Jamie Benn. Now, I say that. Jim Nill has said, as long as I'm here, Jamie Benn will be here. Pete DeBoer said, I pray that he's back. So clearly there's leadership that we don't necessarily see inside the room and on the trips. And I mean, Matt Duchene praised him highly. However, the production went absolutely way down.
Yeah, this one's so tough because he's the captain, he's the leader, he's been there how many years? But like, from an outsider's perspective, he was like unplayable in the playoffs.
Yes.
Like he wasn't doing anything and he was just taking penalties. And I don't know, like Jamie Benn was a great player a long time ago and he's still the captain of the team. I get it. But unless he wants to come back on a very, very cheap deal, this might just have to be one of those tough business decisions that you make. I would let Jamie Benn go. I'm not Jim Nill. I mean, I am for this segment, but I'm not Jim Nill, so I'm not emotionally invested in Jamie Benn. You know, this might be something where a general manager who's been there and had Jamie Benn on his team is a little bit more inclined to bring him back. That's why you hear that comment. Well, as long as I'm here, he's going to be here. From an outset, like I don't see how you bring Jamie Benn back unless it's very cheap and he's on the fourth line next year because his play really plummeted this season, I thought.
Well, tell me from a Winnipeg perspective then, because you guys had a similar situation where your captain moved on in Blake Wheeler.
Yes, so that was also like culture in the room related in a sense. Like, not to say the Jets' culture or their locker room camaraderie was bad, but it needed improvement. And Rick Bowness came in, took the C off of Blake Wheeler's chest, and Blake Wheeler played one more season as not the captain for the Winnipeg Jets. And even in that season, like he was on the top line with Mark Scheifele, but it was very clear that he needed to be in like a third or fourth line role. Like he was punching way above his weight class in terms of who he was as a player at that time. And then the very next season, they bought him out. There was 2 years left on his deal, or 1 year left on his deal, excuse me, at a very high cap hit. So they bought him out, moved on. But it was very clear throughout the season that going into the next season, Blake Wheeler couldn't be back. You either had to move that contract through a trade or buy him out because he was playing too high in the lineup. He wasn't there for his leadership anymore because he lost the captaincy, and he wasn't making an impact. So it was time to move on, and the Winnipeg Jets did.
2 more, Evgenii Dadonov and also Colin Blackwell.
Dadonov and Blackwell fall in the same camp for me, not necessarily as Jamie Benn. That one's a little bit more context-based, but I'd bring them back if it's a very cheap contract because I see those players as effective fourth-liners, and if you can get them for fourth-line money, bring them back. Good depth is good depth in the NHL. The Dallas Stars have some of the best depth in the NHL. I know that that depth necessarily didn't shine through the way you want it to in the playoffs, especially against Edmonton. But those are players that you can put on your fourth line and not have to worry about them, getting absolutely caged throughout the course of a game. So Dadonov and Blackwell, I think, are both quality fourth liners. And if you can bring them back for cheap fourth line money, I'd be all over it.
So I tweeted last week, I believe, Jonathan Toews, as far as how heralding of a career he has had. And it's absolutely amazing. And the fact that he is fighting to get back in the league really just shows so much about him. The All-Star games, the Stanley Cups, the trophies. It's absolutely amazing. So obviously, when a player like that makes a comeback at his age and his agent starts to talk to teams, everyone focuses on Winnipeg because that's where he's from. He's a homegrown boy. Is there any update? And what's the vibe in Winnipeg about bringing on Jonathan Toews for another run?
We've got a rink here named after him, Jonathan Toews rink. It's in like southern Winnipeg. So how could he not come back?
Yeah.
Right? No, from a on ice perspective, here's where I fall with Jonathan Toews. The Winnipeg Jets for a long time now have had a problem finding a long-term solution at second line center. And Jonathan Toews 10 years ago was an incredible hockey player, probably like one of the best centers, one of the best players in the NHL when Chicago was going through their dynasty run. That can't be understated. And I think now that he's 37 years old and having not played for 3 years, what are you expecting to get out of Jonathan Toews? I think you can't bank on anything more than a quality fourth line center. Because Adam Lowry is the third line center for the Jets. And I'll say right now, I don't see a scenario in which Jonathan Toews is better than Adam Lowry next season. So if the Winnipeg Jets were to take a low contract bet on Jonathan Toews returning to a little bit of the form we saw before he stopped playing in the NHL, I'd be okay with that. If he's the fourth line center, counted on for key faceoffs, asked to play defense, not asked to do too much, I'd be all for it. Where I, have pause is if the Winnipeg Jets sign Jonathan Toews and Darren Dreger from TSN even tweeted this out and think, oh, this guy would be a great fit as our second line center, which we've been looking for forever. It's like, no, I don't think that I think you need a first of all, that's not a long-term solution at second line center because he's 37 and you don't know what he has left in the tank. And second of all, I think you need a better option than Jonathan Toews at second line center. So I'm in on Jonathan Toews, and I think that's the consensus vibe is people want Jonathan Toews here, and why wouldn't they? But if I'm looking at it from a lines perspective, I want him as the fourth line center, not the second line center. I think he can make a big impact as the fourth line center, not playing too much every single night, like being counted on in key situations, things like that, as opposed to playing 18 minutes a night and coming back having not played 3 years and punching above his weight class.
Well, one of the things that's interesting that the news broke yesterday, that Brock Nelson, who was on Winnipeg's target list, a lot of teams' target list, the Dallas Stars were also interested, went to Colorado. You thought it was a loner type deal, but yesterday, one of the big re-signings, Colorado re-signs Brock Nelson, 3 years, $7.5 million a year. I found it interesting that this happened so quickly. We are heading to free agency, but at the same time, Brock Nelson not necessarily wanting to test the market, which means he kind of got exactly what he wanted, and Colorado was focused on keeping him.
Yeah, so this deal for me was really interesting for a couple of reasons. One, when you look at the deal that they made for Brock Nelson, it was almost like, okay, you have to bring him back, because if you pay that much for a rental for a player who had 0 points in the first round against the Dallas Stars, like Cal Ritchie in a first is a haul for the New York Islanders. So you almost need to bring that guy back so that it's worth your while that you paid that price. And they did. And they'll get Brock Nelson for the next 3 years. They have McKinnon and Nelson as their top two centers, and they're set. They're going to be competing for a cup for the next 3 years, and those are their centers. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is, what was the reported contract that they offered for Mikko Rantanen, because you just paid Brock Nelson 7.5 in AAV, and at the deadline you brought in Charlie Coyle, who's getting paid $5.2 million in salary next season. You add those two up, well, Mikko Rantanen got $12 million for 8 years from the Dallas Stars. So was it 12 and a half that he asked for? Was it 13? Like, you're already paying Nelson and Coyle roughly or more than what Mikko Rantanen is being paid right now for the Dallas Stars. So what was the number that you were uncomfortable with going for Mikko Rantanen that you're now comfortable in playing Nelson in Coyle? I get that Colorado sees that they have the high-end talent. They have McKinnon and Makar, and maybe they want to space things out. But I know you're a Dallas guy. I would take Mikko Rantanen at 12 million over Nelson and Coyle at 12 and a half or whatever, like all day. So I don't know. And they paid a haul to get Nelson too. Like, it just all seems so weird to me that they paid Cal Ritchie in a first to get Nelson and Middlestat for Coyle to pay them more than what Mikko Rantanen got for the Dallas Stars. Like, it's just, why didn't you just keep Mikko Rantanen in the first place? It's kind of puzzling to me.
Absolutely. And what I tell Stars fans is, and maybe I'm going to be wrong on this, but I'm so excited to see Mikko Rantanen in October when he's gotten that when he's gotten off-season rest, when he's feeling better. He knows he's with one team for a long period of time. It's just setting itself up for a big year for Mikko Rantanen. I can only imagine the emotion that he went through this year, and that brings a lot of stress, tired. He can now get a home here, so a lot to look forward to with Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah, and that shouldn't go understated either. Like, Mikko Rantanen went from Colorado to Carolina to the Four Nations and then to Dallas. And he was just constantly probably in hotel rooms, moving from one team to another. And he honestly played pretty remarkable for just coming in at the trade deadline to Dallas and playing the rest of the season and into the playoffs. So definitely looking for a massive season next year out of Mikko Rantanen. I think you give Roope Hintz and Mikko Rantanen the offseason to develop some chemistry together. Watch out, because Mikko Rantanen, we know what he can do with talented centers. Hintz is a speedy guy too, just like McKinnon. I think they'll have some big chemistry. You saw it at times in the playoffs as well when Rantanen went on his crazy run. So Mikko Rantanen with a full offseason, I think he's going to return. I mean, he already was, but there's going to be no doubt that he's one of the best wingers in the NHL starting next season.
Tough competition for Stars GM Jim Nill this year, the Jim Gregory General Manager of the Year Award, which will happen at the NHL Award Ceremony coming up pretty soon. And the finalists are Jim Nill, looking for his third straight, Bill Zito of the Florida Panthers, and Kevin Cheveldayoff of the Winnipeg Jets. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so in terms of Kevin Cheveldayoff here in Winnipeg, it almost seems like they robbed him last year, so they're giving him a nomination this year. Like, this year, he signed some extensions. Neil Pionk, Alex Iafallo, made a few deals at the deadline that didn't pan out in Brandon Tanev and Luke Schenn. Like, those players came in and they were fine depth players, but they paid 3 second-round picks combined in those trades. It was last offseason where they made the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. This is 2 off seasons ago, but it was the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade for Gabriel Velarde, Alex Iafallo, Rasmus Kupari, and a draft pick. They had some really great signings at that time too. Nino Niederreiter for another $4 million for another 3 years. And it just feels like Kevin Cheveldayoff has done great work up until this year, and this year wasn't his best year, but he's getting the nomination for it this year, which kind of makes no sense. So I feel like the past couple of years he deserved it more, but I understand the nature of these GM of the Year awards. Like, they won the President's Trophy, so it's kind of a cumulative like, hey, he's done well the past couple of years here, let's give him a nomination now. I still think it's going to be Bill Zito, just because Florida's now been to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals. I know it was voted on before that, but he's built an absolute wagon there in Florida, with especially that forward core just looks so good, and they traded for Seth Jones and Brad Marchand at the deadline. So I think it's going to be Bill Zito. Jim Nill obviously could win it too with the Mikko Rantanen trade, and that's a splashy move that can swing votes in a vote like this. But the Kevin Cheveldayoff one is weird to me because I feel like it's from years past that he earned this year's nomination.
Yeah, I thought maybe Chris Patrick might have got some consideration in Washington, or whoever they want to nominate in Washington since he took over in July. I just thought Jacob Chikrin trade was tremendous. And I think Washington is an amazing turnaround story. I mean, they were a team that was similar to here in basketball with the Dallas Mavericks, where it's like, well, Dirk's playing out his final game. So, it's similar to Pittsburgh with Sidney Crosby. You don't want to lose him, but at the same time, it's kind of tough to go through the rebuild when you have a player of that magnitude. And they had it with Alex Ovechkin, but they pulled off some really good trades. And granted, they did get bounced in the first round, but just thought Washington was really solid. Obviously, picking up their goaltender, they had a really good offseason.
Yeah, they did. They can kind of be the model moving forward for like rebuilding on the fly and what that looks like, right? Because everyone thought they were destined for a rebuild, but that wasn't the case. They found a way to keep their team competitive and build around Alexander Ovechkin, who had a late career resurgence in terms of goal scoring to break the record this year. But like the Pierre-Luc Dubois move, the Jacob Chikrin move, like these are players that maybe league-wide people were done with, especially with Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like you go to LA, you have a brutal year in year one of a massive extension. Everyone's kind of low, very low on Pierre-Luc Dubois. They're like, okay, we can fix this problem. So they bring him in and they make him a top six center again. So they kind of took on a lot of people's problems and fixed them. And that's what happened. And they retooled on the fly. And I thought it was a very interesting way to build a team that was not quite ready for a rebuild and still ready to compete by taking on players that were kind of cast-offs from other teams who are also looking to get rid of money and things of that nature.
So a few things stuck out to me with Gary Bettman's press conference, his pre-Stanley Cup press conference that they do yearly. He was up there with Bill Daly, and prior to that, he was up there with the NHL Players Association president. And he made it a point to say that the negotiations, even though they started late, I mean, a very nice shot at the past regimes as far as like negotiating, but it just seems as though, one, that they're going to get a deal done, which is great. They have a year to go. Number two, they're playing ball with each other as far as charities and just a lot of other aspects. The other thing I noticed was it was brought up regarding tax breaks. That has a lot to do with Dallas. And you do look at our friend Sean Shapiro on his Shapshot Substack, wrote a great article, I thought, regarding taxes. And you look at the teams that have appeared in the Stanley Cup: Tampa, Florida, Vegas, Dallas, 3 Western Conference Finals. They all have no state income tax. So I thought that was interesting. But Bill Daly shut that aspect down and said this has been something that's been going on forever. So no, it hasn't even been talked about. And we're not going to get a new playoff system for a while.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm most disappointed about is the playoff system. I am a big believer in the 1v8 system that they had forever. And my whole point to Jets fans as well, when making this point on Winnipeg Sports Talk was, look, the Blues were a wild card team, and that is not decided by divisional or not, right? Like the 1 seed would have played a wild card team anyways. And the Dallas Stars were decided by the fact that this was the playoff format. And Jets fans coming out of these 2 series hate the St. Louis Blues about 10 times more than they do the Dallas Stars. Just the nature of that series. It was so physical, went right down to the finish line. The Blues with counter punching. Like, I just think Jets fans have a lot more disdain for the St. Louis Blues than they do the Dallas Stars. And both of those teams were in the Central Division. So I don't see how it really makes a difference in terms of whether or not you're in the division. You either hate a team or you don't. Like, rivalries are natural, in my opinion. So I also think that the decentralized draft was something that I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah.
And Gary Bettman did say that was the way that the teams wanted to go. So unless they want to move it back to the way it was, they're just going to keep it the way it is, which I'm not a big fan of either. He doesn't want to extend overtime was another thing I noted, which I kind of agree with. Like, I think 5-minute overtime 10-minute overtime would be exciting, but at some point the game has got to end in the regular season as well. So I'm kind of both on that. But the biggest win, I think, for Gary Bettman, and this is like, so doesn't really matter, but someone asked him about a play-in. So the NBA has a play-in where the 7 through 10 seed in each conference plays each other to play into the playoffs, just to get like absolutely demolished by a team in the first round. Like, anyways, he laughed at the idea of a play-in and said, quote, "We had a play-in. The last 3 positions in the playoffs weren't determined until the last game of the season," which I am very much applauding Gary Bettman for. We do not need a play-in in the NHL. Look, the East, like, teams were falling backwards into that final 8 spot. Like, to watch more games of these bad teams trying to get into the 8 seed just to get absolutely rocked by the 1 seed, I don't think has any real value to it. And the NHL is a league with so much parity that they were good enough to be the race was close enough down the stretch that it was basically a play-in, like Gary Bettman said. So those were my big takeaways from the presser.
I would have thought that question was a setup because Bettman came back so quick with just great analytics on that and overtime. Like, he had the statistics ready. He was prepped as far as not even looking down at his notes. He was looking down at his notes for other things, but not when it came to those questions. And I absolutely love how he just leaned over to Bill. You could tell the questions that he was frustrated at, because he'd look over at Bill Daly and say, "You take that one. You take that one."
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I feel like maybe he's been asked the same question every year. Question for you. We do talk a little bit about PWHL here. Vancouver gets an expansion team. Seattle gets a expansion team. I don't like how you're only allowed to keep 3 players protected. That's a lot of people moving, especially with the salaries that they make. But was Winnipeg ever in the mix for a franchise?
I have heard that Winnipeg is interested in a franchise. I don't think they were ever in the mix this time around. I do know that Minnesota obviously has been very successful as a PWHL franchise. They've won back-to-back years, the Walter Cup. But I don't think that Winnipeg was interested this time around. I do like the fact that it's expanding because they do these games. There's a professional word for it. I'm blanking on it, but they do these games where they go to cities and play a game there, and like every single city it goes to, it sells out. So I think that is something you'll see in Winnipeg before a team. You'll see Minnesota and Ottawa come and play in Winnipeg at Canada Life Center, see what the response is like, and then maybe get a team after that. So I don't think Winnipeg was in the mix this time around, but in the future, I could see them getting one of the games and then eventually a team.
And finally, Central Division question. Is there a team going into free agency that you're saying to yourself, "Ooh, I hope they don't sign anybody because they're on the cusp. This thing could change as far as next year," because it clearly with the Metro Division is a brutal division. I mean, I don't know, maybe all the divisions in the NHL are pretty brutal nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. The one team that I'm hoping doesn't make any big splashes, Utah. I think they're really building something special there. I think they do have a lot of cap space to work with. They're reportedly in on Mitch Marner. They're reportedly in on Nikolai Ehlers, who's a Winnipeg Jet and might not be a Winnipeg Jet post July 1. And Utah's a team that I think if they were to get a Mitch Marner and they got some health on their blue line, which they got absolutely none of last season, like Sergachev, Dursey, and Marino were all hurt for like months at a time. And if they're able to get any kind of stability on their blue line, they're able to get like a Mitch Marner, Logan Cooley takes another step forward, Clayton Keller, Dylan Gunther, like they have some young up and coming talent. And I think they're on the cusp, maybe not of, being like a contender in the West or anything like that, but being a very viable threat to maybe crack the top 3 in the Central Division and maybe make it in as a 3 seed or leapfrog Minnesota or something like that as a wild card team, at least in the short term.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
I think the going into the free agency and next season, I think like Winnipeg, Dallas, Colorado, that's going to be the top 3. And I think until one of those 3 teams drops out, You can safely predict those three being the top three. But if Utah makes some big moves, like a Mitch Marner, watch out. I predicted them to make the playoffs last year. They barely missed it. St. Louis just beat them for that. But if they get a big splash in free agency, I'll definitely be picking them to make the playoffs.
Stick Tap, you and I are the only ones mentioning Utah. Now I'm known as a Utah homer around here. My guy Michael Kesselring having a good year.
Oh yeah. Kesselring. I forgot him on the blue line.
Yeah. He had to step up. I said finally, but this became a big story in the United States that the U.S. went overseas and won the World Championships. Was it even on the radar in Canada?
It was. So I was okay. I'm not a big Worlds guy in general, but it's usually because Canada is just sending like bottom six NHLers because no one wants to play in the tournament. We had Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon playing, and Macklin Celebrini, and we lose to Denmark. Sorry, but they won the Four Nations, and that was huge. But the World Juniors success as of late, and the Worlds, it's just a long list of Canada coming up short in these tournaments, and I'm growing tired of it already because it hasn't happened much in my lifetime, but it's starting to happen more and more, and I'm not used to it. I'm not used to watching Hockey Canada lose in the quarters in every single tournament I watch. So,
well, it's not like you went 90 plus years like we did.
Right. Yes. Well, congrats to you guys for breaking the long drought. Definitely deserved it. Had a great team, but man, I mean, we sent Sidney Crosby and we lost to Denmark.
It's true.
What are we doing here?
I give hockey credit compared to the other sports. Absolutely amazing, the studs that went over to play in that after a long, grueling season. Yeah. I could not believe the names that were going over there. And it just seems as though wearing your country's sweater is kind of a cool thing again. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the Four Nations added to that too.
Yes,
I think a lot of players who maybe are on the cusp for playing for Canada, not a McKinnon or a Crosby, but Macklin Celebrini, who wasn't on the Four Nations roster, who is probably going to be on the Olympic team next year, maybe the next Olympics or the next World Cup. I mean, he's very young right now, but he's a big part of Hockey Canada's future. He's going to be like a top line center in the future for Canada. Yeah. He went and he's learning from Sidney Crosby, and he's, feeling what it's like to play in big games because he played for the San Jose Sharks this year and all those things. So those are all valuable experiences for these players. And I think the Four Nations was such a hit that if you got invited, you're not turning that down. You want to represent your country. Even if it's halfway across the world and you lose in the quarterfinals, it's still a dream, I would imagine, to represent your country.
I'm now going to call it the Seth Jones effect, where it's like we were all excited to see Frisco's Seth Jones on a viable franchise, and it's amazing how everyone's talking about Seth Jones and how good he is again. Now that he's away from Nashville, now that he's away from Chicago. And I would say the same thing about Tage Thompson. The World's kind of showed everyone that, he's in Buffalo, and every year it seems as though we all say this is the year Buffalo's going to come around. But man, when he's healthy, that guy's a beast. He really reminds me of Lindros on the ice, how big he is.
Well, yeah, and for Buffalo, he puts up 50 goal seasons and no one cares.
I know.
Because Buffalo is last in the East every single year. So it doesn't matter. He's just scoring garbage goals is what everyone probably views it as. But man, he's 6'6" and has hands like that and shot like that. Yeah. He might even be taller than 6'6". I don't even know at this point. He might still be growing. We don't even know. But Tage Thompson is definitely one of the most underrated players in the league just because he plays in Buffalo. And if he gets out of Buffalo at some point, or Buffalo somehow gets good, which is seems like a long shot, people are going to take notice of Tage Thompson. He's so much fun to watch.
I want to put together and sorry to drag this out, but I want to put together all time, or not all time, but just current NHL stars that nobody talks about. Tage Thompson's one of them. Sebastian Aho doesn't get the credit because he's in Carolina. I'd put Anze Kopitar on there that, nice. He's not listed. There are just a bunch of names. I tell Stars fans, Connor, there are no bad games because whoever comes to town, they have one or two studs. They're just not talked about as much.
Exactly. And that's something you see, Winnipeg as well. It's so funny. With Winnipeg being good these past two regular seasons, what you see when you listen to the opposing team's play-by-play is, like Josh Morrissey. Like, we watch Josh Morrissey 82 games a year, and you'd think people know that he's an incredible defenseman. But then you'll hear like opposing fan bases or opposing play-by-play commentators be like, this 44 Josh Morrissey is incredible. And it's like, yeah, we know. That's why when he went to the Four Nations, it was like, this is great. He's going to get some national recognition. And then he got sick and missed the finals. But anyways, as a smaller market in Winnipeg, I can tell you absolutely, not that our players always go underrated, but it's nice to get that recognition from opposing fan bases, because it's like, yeah, we watch Josh Morrissey 82 games a year, and we think he's a top 5 defenseman. And it's nice to see other teams catch on to the fact that he's very, very good at hockey.
Yeah, Kyle Connor's another one. Yeah. Just consistently puts up numbers.
Consistently scores. Yep. And again, people don't really talk about him, but then you'll play against Winnipeg on a random Tuesday night and he'll have a hat trick. And it's like, whoa, this guy's really good. It's like, yeah, we know.
So many things to promote because you have so much going on, but let's list them once again. The greatness of Connor Hrabchak. You have a podcast this Sunday morning, right?
Yes, WST Sunday Live on Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube channel.
That's awesome.
Yes.
You are with Winnipeg Sports Talk, obviously, and talk about your writing a little bit. What you do as far as your other stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gavin, for giving me the opportunity to plug my work here. Yeah, illegalcurve.com is where I write articles. I usually write long form content, so a lot of my articles are deeper dives, over 1,000 words on whatever the topic is regarding the Winnipeg Jets. I've got something cooking for this weekend on some Jets prospects who might crack the roster next year, whether or not it's warranted because they had a great offseason, or because a player like Nikolai Ehlers leaves in free agency and they need a young player to step up. So that's an article that I'm working on right now. You can find my writing at illegalcurve.com. And then, yeah, of course, Winnipeg Sports Talk YouTube. We've always got great Jets content coming out on that channel. We go live every single Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock. I go live at 9 a.m. every single Sunday morning. It's just an hour of hockey and Jets talk. It's super, super fun. If you're ever looking for Jets content, definitely stop by, and we'd really appreciate that.
Absolutely, my friend. I say it all the time. You're a beast. Our Spits and Suds listeners really enjoy your takes on the Stars, on the Jets, and overall in the NHL. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. This was a great offseason pod. Thank you, buddy.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll come on anytime. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
That is awesome. The greatness of Connor Hrabchak. That's going to do it for another edition of Spits and Suds. We're going to have another podcast soon. We're just rolling these podcasts out in the offseason. We have a lot of stuff to talk about. You'll hear it right here. No offseason for us on Spits and Suds. Until our next podcast. Have a great day, everyone.